Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Live, 2 o'clock, a little bit after 2 o'clock on this May the 7th. How can you contain yourself? You know, this week we had May the 4th be with you, followed the very next day by Cinco de Mayo, and now here we are, mowing towards the middle of May. Perfect weather outside in Michigan, and it's great to be here. Now, I have lots to get to today, and I'll just tell you about it. I got some things on recruiting and Michigan's approach to football recruiting right now with the latest. Also, my last thoughts, at least this week, maybe this month, about Sherrone Moore in Michigan being proactive and suspending him, a self-imposed 2-game suspension. I got more thoughts on that. That thing has just been turning around, probably, I think, a lot like you all out there, that it just constantly is going through your mind about, well, what about this? What about that? And so I'll present some of those things to you. We'll start with Joel Klatt. He put out his top 25. I didn't have to say it like that. Joel Klatt came out with his top 25. I put my top 5 out last week, and Joel likes Michigan, so that's good. Before I do that, I just want to share some fun news. It's just myself personally. You know, there's the idea that you try new things and hard things, and that it's good for you. It's good for your spirit. It's good for your mind. Good for everything. Oh, I have this riding lawnmower that last year I didn't do anything. I just drove it into the garage with the gas half full and let it sit all winter, no winterizing, and then went out there last year, jumped aboard, turned it over, and within 5 seconds it was roaring. And I was like, knock on the lawnmower. Nice job. Great job. Fired right up. This year, I did the same thing. Hey, it worked last year. Forget the winterizing and all this. I don't need to do all that. So a couple weeks ago, I jumped on there. Nothing. And so then I know how to jump a lawnmower, riding lawnmower. So I did that. Nothing. And I thought, well, I got to get some fresh gas in there. No, I had to get some super gas that was going to help break. No. And then today I went out and did something that I bought. I was going to change the spark plug. All right, let's go down the list and try some of these things. Well, I couldn't find all the sockets, so I had to go out and buy a new socket set. And then I get in there and I realize it doesn't matter. The spark plug's this long and all my sockets are this long. This isn't helping, even though I bought an extender to these things. That's what I thought I needed, and I didn't. And then I bought a spark plug extender, and I got it out yesterday. And then I got the new spark plug today. And then I put it in there, and with the aid of a jump, boom, it started right up. And then I drove it around a little bit. And then I came back in and I stopped it, and then I jumped back on. I turned it over, and boom, it started right up. So very excited about that. The lawn, I have goats who if they just worked on the grass, they might be able to knock that sucker down enough. I saw someone who had, they had a lot more goats, but the guy said, yeah, they keep it knocked down pretty good. I don't even have to mow. And I thought, wow, that'd be nice. I only have 2 goats, and they, half the time they just lay around. And, they don't just sit there and eat the grass. But it was getting to the point where if I didn't get this thing done today, certainly by this weekend, the grass was getting too long. I was going to have to, pay someone a couple $100 to come out and do it. So it's all good. So I'm feeling good about what's going on. It was old John Deere. Jumped right on there and got that thing going. And it's great. I've done some things, I'm not I was going to say mechanically inclined. I don't know. I don't know anybody is. Maybe they watch their dad or their mom or their brother or whatever else, and then they do it and they learn it. My dad wasn't really into all of that, but you learn some things as you go. You have to figure some things out there. I've been able to put the belt back on. I feel like I am now somewhat mechanically inclined. I'd never changed the spark plug before. I don't know how many of you out there had never done that, but it felt good. I was thinking, and I didn't ask. I was thinking with a spark plug, and I think it's probably what happens with a car. You take it out there, and then you got to put some kind of spacer in there to make sure. But I don't know. I didn't do that, and I just put it on in there, and it worked. Somebody will probably tell me, "Oh yeah, you should have put some kind of spacer in there because now it'll be, that thing won't last." I believe you if it happened. So I'm feeling good about that. I hope you're feeling good as well. I think if you like Michigan, and you do, Joe Klatt likes Michigan. I was thinking that if I had to project where Michigan and top 25 polls, we can all agree that they're meaningless, but preseason top 25 polls, the only one that matters is the final one, right? I hear that, but we have them immediately when the season is done, and then we have them after the spring, and then at some point in August you'll have it be like, this is a joke, this team's overrated, but they're fun to talk about. And somebody's going to put one out there. I was thinking that Michigan would be somewhere in the 20s. I still do when the preseason poll comes out, and hey, they go out there and take care of business. They don't have to worry about it. I think if Michigan gets to 10 wins, that they'll be in the college football playoffs. If they get to 9 wins, I think is there a possibility? I think they would need a lot of things to go their way. We'll be arguing. I'll probably be arguing myself. They deserve it. They're the best 9-3 team, whatever. But if they get to 10, I feel like, they got a strong argument and they'll be there. But I think they'll start somewhere in the 20s. Klatt, if you hadn't seen this, or if you're listening via the podcast, has Michigan at number 12. Now, he's got Penn State at number 1. Everybody immediately was like, wait, checking their notes. James Franklin's still the head coach there. You're going to put James Franklin and Penn State number 1? Yeah, and they deserve that, and James Franklin deserves that. I put Ohio State, for those that missed it, I put Ohio State at number 1 with the reasoning of they are the defending champs, and they have the best offensive player with Jeremiah Smith and the best defensive player in all of college football. Plus, and I put Texas at number 2, and I had freely admit that this is a hype move by me, and I think that it'll be by others. But these two teams play, Ohio State and Texas play to kick off the season, and who doesn't like a number 1 versus number 2? I know that social media listens to what I have to say, but it's almost like they knew what I was thinking. But now that I'm sitting here and I am talking 1 versus 2, and my phone is right here, the last time I did that, after I was done, I was looking at TikTok, and TikTok sent me it was all of the Rocket Ismail, I think 6 kickoff returns for touchdowns. And I was like, I remember 2 of them. So I watched a little bit of it. And then in 1989, Michigan, it was number 1 versus number 2, Michigan and Notre Dame. And the Rocket took 2 kickoffs back and beat Michigan. I'm thinking, wow, man, TikTok really does listen to what I have to say. But then I was thinking maybe they're reading my mind, but they didn't have to read my mind. My phone's right here. But who doesn't like an old number 1 versus number 2? I got Oregon up there. I had Penn State. You see why they like them. They did make the playoffs last year. They bring a lot of players back. I know they lose some pretty high-end defensive players, but Aller, their quarterback. Same thing with Clemson with Klubnik. And so I see a little bit. I think so. Me and Klatt and myself, we have the same top 5, just in different orders. And so if you don't like Penn State and you were doing this, it's always the thing, like if you were doing it, well, who would you put? And most people would say, well, just put Michigan there, or let's have Let's have Michigan be number one. But then there's a lot of Michigan fans like, I don't want to be number one. The pressure that goes with that. I like being disrespected because then, Michigan can use that. And I think there's a point to all of those things. I know people say that the players don't need to be, if they need to get fired up about a poll or something, then they shouldn't be out on the field. All right. But teams do latch on to something, and it could be disrespect of the top 25 poll. It could be disrespect for the NCAA and, how they're treating Michigan and their coach. More on that coming up with a free Sherrone segment that is straight ahead. But whatever it is, that's what I'm thinking, and that's how I feel right now when I saw Joel Klatt's top 25, and there it is. Now, I wanted to move on to recruiting. And for those of you that follow the game of recruiting, why not follow it via the Maize and Blue Review? We're the best at it. And we get after it. We're not just, throwing out, sure, cast a net of 1,000 players and you get people, we're putting the key players out there and the legitimate chances of getting them. It's a lot of fun. And that's just scratching the surface, talking about recruiting the team, football, basketball. It's all there. A friendly community on the Den. You can get instant access right now by going to michigan.rivals.com. I encourage you every time I'm on here to go jump in because it is a lot of fun. Now, the news this week about recruiting, those of you that have watched this show know that I really like the wide receiver, and so do you, out of Cass Tech, CJ Sadler, 5'11", 185. He's a slot wideout, listed as a slot wideout from Cass Tech. He's undecided, but Michigan's been recruiting him for a long time, and hey, you feel like Michigan, he's the number one player in Michigan, which, feels like Michigan every year should get. They don't get him every year, but it feels like they should get the number one player every year. It feels like they should get the top 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5. Last year it was like that. It's not always like that, but I'd like to see him get Sadler. Well, then recruiting has somewhat slowed down since they got Smigel a couple of weeks ago, Brady Smigel, the quarterback out of California. And it's more of even than a theory. Michigan, along with the self-imposed 2-game suspension, it appears they're also suspending themselves or taking themselves off the road as a preemptive recruiting violation. They have preemptively taken themselves off the road, which they're hoping is going to help come early June when it comes down to a verdict from the NCAA. You get that. Furthermore, there have been some recruits that said Michigan is not promising dollar amounts. They're not giving dollar amounts, exact dollar amounts when it comes down to NIL. And a lot of people are like, oh, here we go again. Michigan is playing it cheap. I mean, this is somewhat, that is leading negatively. This is an approach by Michigan. And why would they be doing this? Well, they're doing it because on April the 7th, you were supposed to have some clarity when the revenue sharing settlement was complete. But, the judge was like, no, she wasn't signing off on it. So it's still out there. And the news is that U of M is not giving exact NIL offers to recruits until the revenue sharing settlement is complete. Now, the views could be, Michigan's going to lose out on a lot of recruits because other teams are doing, performing or operating, I should say, business as usual. They're putting the numbers out there. They're reeling guys in, left and right. Notre Dame comes to mind. Texas, also, they're out there. And so you could say, well, is Michigan doing this right? Michigan thinks that when it comes down to revenue sharing and that they're not going to give out exact numbers, they must think that there's going to be a hard cap on the revenue sharing. Now it is supposed to be what 22 million, I think, maybe 22 and a half. And so there is the cap, but also there's going to be a cap on collectives then, which you could say, I don't believe that, but why would Michigan not come up with the numbers for recruits if they can, if the NIL collective is unlimited money like it is right now? Jolin can, send over 100 million to Michigan and they could be out there doling it out. There's no rule against that right now. You could pay Bryce Underwood $15 million, right? Whatever it was, 8-figure deal. And you could get him, but Michigan is tapping the brakes and saying we're not going to give exact dollar amounts out. Now, I think the prevailing theory is that Michigan is doing this because they don't want to spend too much money, and then there'll be this cap, and then they're going to have to rescind the offer. And, my thought on that is that we're almost halfway through the 26 recruiting cycle. Are they really going to tell teams that have already put money out there, no. Now that we have this rule that we're putting right into the middle of the season, you can't spend over this certain amount because there's going to be a hard cap. We have this collective bargaining agreement right now. I would bet that it would start in 2027 if there was going to be a hard cap, meaning that this would be the last year of just free spending. So why would Michigan just get involved in some free spending? But they do have a strategy. Well, they have thought about this. They didn't just come in there and Ward said, let's just freeze any promises to recruits. Let's just completely, let's just slow it down and tell them, nope, we're not giving any numbers out that's what some people would think. Let's freeze them out. So why would they do it? Other than that, I was thinking that the strategy could be, why bid against yourself? Now, there was just a running back that Michigan was in on. What was his name? Osborne, right? It's running back Osborne. Javian Osborne ended up going to Notre Dame. I think he committed last week. Michigan, it was between Notre Dame and Michigan, maybe some others, but Michigan and Notre Dame. And Michigan really, along with Hyder, those were their top two from all indications. And then Osborne goes to Notre Dame. If Osborne checked in with Michigan and Michigan's like, yeah, we're just not going to promise you any NIL numbers right now. And Notre Dame's like, we've got $2 million for you, $2 million for 4 years. Is it smart for Michigan? So they got their agent, and Osborne's agent's like, we got 2 coming from Notre Dame. Where are you guys at? Well, they know where the market's at right now. I think that this is part of their strategy, is that they're not putting the numbers out there. They're letting other teams do the bidding. And then I don't know if they're going to wait till November like they did with Underwood and flip them, but there's a long time to go. And they can use the settlement about team revenue sharing as cover and saying, when that settlement comes in, whenever that's going to be, the next week, next month. And then they're also able to get the NCAA suspension stuff in the rearview mirror. Well, then they can just come over the top and start saying, maybe like with Osborne, like, hey, we're ready. We've got $5 million. You had 4, we got 5. And so they'll come up with their final offers then that way. But does it do any good to just throw the money around right now and establish it? Sure. You have the kind of idea of what you want for your running back room and how much you want to spend, but you can always go and might have to go a little bit more. So I know that's I was going to say a lot of talk. It's a lot of I'm confused, you're confused, I'm confused, maybe Michigan's confused. I don't know. But those were my thoughts on it. Now, if you had any questions or points to that, I would be happy to go over them. Let's take some of the feedback, and we go to RM, who asked the question, do you think Michigan feels that once they get clarity, they can put together NIL deals to flip the recruits they want, like they did with Underwood, and that's why they're not rushing into deals? Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I think the prevailing theory was that once they get the numbers, then they're going to know what they're dealing with. But that also makes you feel like there would be a hard cap. Hey, you can only spend $20 million with the school, and then maybe you can only spend only $20 million with your collective. I doubt that that's going to happen. I doubt that there's going to be a hard cap with the collectives. Of course, there is going to be. You want a cap if you're a university. You don't want an unlimited cap. You want to protect yourself. If there was an unlimited cap, then these players, then these schools would have to be dishing out 50, 100 million. And they don't want that. They want others to pay for it. They're going to pay a little bit, but they want that collective to have an unlimited. It's nothing off of them, and it's just off the fans. Now, the fans want a cap on themselves. If the cap was low enough, we would be back like the old days. Let's just say that the team's revenue is the school revenue settlement comes out where it's 20 million, and the schools are paying, basketball, football, and all the other sports. Plus, you can only get half of that through a collective. Well, or even matching that. Well, then you're going to be back to the old days where teams are going to be, slide money under the table. But if you have a collective bargaining agreement, maybe they'll be able to get those teams and be able to put punishment in sooner when it comes down to the game that everybody has played for so long, and that is pay for play before NIL. Everybody was doing it for so long that everybody just looked away in a sport rampant with cheating. It was like, no, let's go after other people for doing other things that, as a comparison to, speeding on the highway is jaywalking, and let's totally go towards that. And that brings us to what's going on with Sherrone Moore and Michigan suspending him for 2 games. I've noticed that there is a portion of Michigan fans who are upset that Michigan is suspending a self-imposed suspension of Sherrone Moore for 2 games. And I understand it. Nobody likes the NCAA. Everybody immediately, say they're a joke. And there's a lot of truth through that. And a lot of Michigan fans want to fight the NCAA. They want to take them to court. And there's even the idea, which is not completely far-fetched, that Michigan could tangle this situation up in the courts for years, and then the NCAA is going to get canceled, and then Michigan will be a winner. Now, there's a lot of people that I don't know about a lot. There's at least that line of thinking. The other line of thinking is Michigan could get they could get Big Gretsch, they could get the Attorney General, and they could just sue at every turn, and and continue and win it in the court. And the part where you have to self-impose, it's a little bit like, if not exactly like, taking a plea agreement. Now, you could be a lawyer and say it's nothing like that. Okay. But at least the part where you have to admit some guilt, that's what Michigan is doing. Now, there are people that accept plea agreements that it's easier for them, because if they go through it and lose, it's like this. You want to spend a year in the slammer, or do you want to do some community service? And if that is presented to you by a lawyer, you're like, no, nobody likes picking up garbage on the side of the expressway in a jumpsuit. I don't know if you have to wear a jumpsuit. Maybe you do. Or vest that says, I don't know if it says inmate or community service. That's embarrassing. And you have to admit that you did it, or whatever. Sign something to say you did it. And, and that's what's going on right now. But the other side is, the possibility they have to spend a year in the slammer. You have to know the facts and you have to go through it. There are some people that think that it doesn't matter. You've seen the facts. Let's fight it. Michigan didn't do anything wrong. They have said all along they haven't done anything wrong. They are completely squeaky clean. This is 100% a target of the NCAA. Michigan is completely above all of this, and they've done nothing wrong. Now, look, that is that's an interesting spot to live if you're a Michigan fan. And there are plenty of them. Like the Michigan's being attacked for buying a burger for a recruit. Michigan's being attacked for doing what every other team does. So I don't know. It really does come down to how you feel about it. Michigan versus the NCAA. But I understand people that want to fight it because you do have to admit some guilt. And when you do that, if the world and most people that are watching this, I understand it. I'm with you on this. Everything revolves around Michigan football and your love of Michigan football, and admitting guilt gives rivals, Michigan State and Ohio State specifically, an in to attack you, to go after you via whatever it is, trash talk or trolling. And for a lot of people, I don't know, half of the Michigan fan base, that's a big part of their love of Michigan football. It's being able to look down, and tell your rival to go stick it, and telling them, that they're the crooks and that they don't know what they're talking about, and get a life. And by admitting some guilt, you have to take a little bit of grief. And so I understand it from that point. Michigan is everything, football, and that's very high on people's lists, having to deal with your rivals. But I know you want to go down with the ship and fight this, but mitigating damage and being prudent, those are not two things that are, like, hey, let's be prudent. Let's mitigate damage. Those aren't really rallying cries but that's what's going on here. If your ass was in the jackpot, it'd be a little bit different. You make it's easy. I think it's easy for me whenever I see, not fans. This is nothing. If you're a fan, you say, oh, why are you attacking me? I'm not. I get all of that. But there's a lot of fans that are in the media too. And anybody in the media that I hear attacking the NCAA, as much as it's just a circus, this process and everything else, I immediately am just like, oh, okay, well, that's going to be your approach. Attacking the NCAA, and then the other part is just going to Michigan and being like, Michigan has done nothing. The two sides, attacking the NCAA and acting like Michigan's done nothing. It's the part that I step away from and tell everyone is like, this is okay. A little community service is okay. Sherrone Moore missing a couple games and a fine and whatever they do with recruiting, maybe it can be hurtful and damaging. I get that. I don't like it, but this is the cost of what it's going to be. Now, I don't talk about this every day or even every week, but when the news comes out, I analyze it and then I give my thoughts on it. Now, this whole thing takes time and it's torture. There's a part of it. It feels like Michigan's on probation right now because they're in the news, the spotlight's on them. Everybody weighs in, and they, people that have not been doing this every day or thinking about it every day, then just parachute in and then just start talking about all kinds of crazy stuff. But this is what I go back to, and I'm going to read some of your feedback. As I think about Burgergate, Signgate, Michigan suspending Sherrone Moore for 2 games and hoping that is going to be enough. And if they do end up getting this resolved where it's going to be, I say, just 2 games, to me, this feels like a win. But even if it was a little bit something more, I don't know, another game. I don't know about 2, but even another one. The thing that I keep coming back to myself was it worth it? And immediately I say yes. A Moore suspension, if Jim Harbaugh was still here, Moore, but he's not. So Moore is the head coach, so he has to take it. They're small items. Jim Harbaugh made small items and made them a bigger deal. And I can't defend the NCAA. They are the head of this circus and NOAs and COIs. And I know that other fan bases, and it seems like the NCAA wants this as well. They want you to shave your head, throw you in the middle of the street, and have all the fans just throw garbage at you while they ring a bell. Shame, shame, shame. And, nobody wants that. You want to fight when it comes down, but that's what the NCAA seemingly wants. That's certainly what, your rival fans want. And they want you to bend down on your knee and, admit the shame and guilt and everything. So it was worth it. This is a sport, like I mentioned before, that has allowed, because almost everyone that was winning was committing level 1 violations nonstop by paying players. But it happened so much. It was like, well, everybody's doing it. We can't stop it. That Michigan gets caught with a little jaywalking, and then Harbaugh because he's fed up with it, he tells everybody to go jump in the lake, and then it elevates and, it just keeps, steam rolling from there. Look, it was worth it. Teams have paid players for decades. I always wondered how Harbaugh was going to fight beyond even being a great coach. And Harbaugh is a great coach. He's a great game day coach. And he was also great on the outside too, looking for edges everywhere that he possibly could, always looking for an edge. And that it got pushed and that it got into this situation, to me, it's worth it. That's where I come back to, and we'll see what happens on June 6th or 7th. But that's how I see it. It was worth it. If they can get where it's just 2 games, that's not that big of a deal. Teams, you lose your starting corner for a game or 2, maybe even your quarterback for a game or 2. You can survive that. Michigan could still have a great season, and Sherrone Moore can serve this 2-game suspension, and they can put it behind them. The one thing for sure, that if they fought this at every round, that this was going to be, the people that keep talking about the hammer. I believe that there would be a hammer waiting potentially for Michigan if they wanted to fight like a lot of people. And then, again, it's easy, and I understand it. Fight them, take them to court, give them nothing, sit nobody down, concede nothing. Let's take them to court at every turn. That's just Michigan. Well, that's a high stakes game. I believe that going the route that they're going is the correct way. And it's not going to be that painful. But again, I understand how it's going to be more painful for you. And I like Michigan. I don't think anyone out there likes Michigan football more than me. But people like things differently. The part about that you just can't take it from the guy at work who, you're always talking about Sparty this or Buckeye that, that's rough. I get that part. That could be very rough if that's your life, and people love it. That way, there's I think probably more people that are into that kind of fandom that are into, being like, yeah, that's not that big of a deal to me. there's more people that are into the Sparty and Buckeye type thing. So that's it from me. I know I went on and on and on. I apologize. I tried to get to the point as quickly as I could. So I'll take some of your feedback on it. Keegan says, what would be a good penalty for paying players pre-NIL? Well, the part was if you could catch them. And this is a part where it comes down to, where Michigan is in all of the years that I watched it. This is how it went. You pretty much knew for sure, you were the NCAA, that Alabama was paying to get a defensive lineman. So you called Alabama and said, hey, we think that you're paying a player. And Alabama said, no, we're not. And so then the NCAA would call, the investigators would call the specific player and they would say, did you take money to come to Alabama? And the player would say, no. And they couldn't do anything about it. You don't have subpoena power when you're the NCAA. So you can't get them. And that was the thing with Harbaugh when they said, hey, you were visiting a recruit during a time when it was there was a no contact period. And Harbaugh said, I don't remember that. And then unfortunately for Harbaugh, was it a former coach or whoever it was, said, yeah, well, why don't you ask so-and-so? They were there during the no contact. They threw Michigan under the bus, turned Michigan in, when it came down to it. And then I think that player's parent was like, yeah, we met Michigan during the non-contact period. So they got Michigan and they got Harbaugh. And then they asked Grant Newsom the same thing. Hey, you were visiting, and Grant Newsom was like, I don't remember that. And the player's like, yeah, we met. So tough thing. So a good penalty, I don't know. It's a level 1 violation, Keegan. That's the thing. And that's the hard part, I think, for a lot of people. I think myself included, when it came down to the scouting bylaw, that it's written weekly, not every week. It's written poorly, and that you could make a case where you could just work around it. This was not what it's meant for. It was meant to save costs. It was put in, back before there were even cell phones. So let's just work around this. If you're Michigan and, Stallions thought he was, pretty smart guy. Hey, I'm just going to work around this rule. I don't know. A level 1 violation, a good penalty would be what a level 1 violation is. Suspension, fines. I don't know. Michigan's got 6 of them going against them right now, I think. RM says it's hypocrisy. OSU and Rutgers can send our signals to Purdue in 2022 before the Big Ten championship, and it's not an unfair advantage. Isn't this the same thing? Yeah, those guys were sharing it differently than what the Stallions were. I mean, that's the difference. Yeah, you could say that this is that part's weird, that teams could exchange film and send each other computer files back and forth. And as long as you were getting it off the, you could talk to a coach. The one thing that you could not do is send somebody to the game and have them shoot the video. That's the difference. That's what the NCAA is going to say. So I don't know. We've been kind of around and around that. Bo says, we do the blanking around here, not them. You'd have to expand a little bit on that. I don't know what it means. Big Daddy says he loves Michigan, but right now they are run by a bunch of blank liberal Democrats. Well, when are they not have ever been run by a bunch of liberal Democrats? I mean, in my life, Michigan's always been run like that. So you love Michigan, you always have, but you just don't like the makeup of the university, which most universities are like that, especially in the North. So you don't like Northern universities' politics. So you would like Michigan to go against, you want Michigan to fight tooth and nail when you've seen some of the evidence. Or Michigan started out saying, no, we didn't do anything. And then they're like, well, maybe we did a little bit. And that's where we are now. That you don't like any kind of plea agreement. You don't like anybody, admitting anything. Let's take them to court on anything. I'm not saying that that's not the way I want to go about it. I don't want to spend a year in jail, or in this case, have Michigan get the book thrown at them, where it could end up being them, not being able to play for a playoff spot, being, shut out of get a postseason ban, which would be a hammer. I don't know if they could go back and retro. I know people say, oh, it's an illegal players. NCAA can do anything they want. I know there's no precedent for that. But if they snub their nose at every single thing like they were and didn't push anything out there and do what you want them to do, Big Daddy, there's the possibility. I'm not saying you're just a big, bad, tough guy. We want, to act like, whatever, Republicans, whatever you want to do, or we just want to fight them because I'm tough and we got great lawyers. And let's not go down like that. Well, what's the upside? Well, the upside is they could be exonerated. They got to play this out. They got to win in court and be like, man, Michigan fought the law and won. Michigan came out unscathed. They took it to the NCAA. It is Michigan versus everyone. What a great day that would be. And all along, you could be like, yeah, come on, NCAA. Or you could get hit with a hammer right in the face. And you could, with Bryce Underwood, not this upcoming year, but the following year. Who the hell knows how long this thing could play out in the courts. You could have Michigan in position to win a national championship, and the NCAA could be like, nope, we get a postseason ban. You can say, no, but the NCAA doesn't run the postseason. Well, the people that are voting and everything there, if the NCAA came back, you really think they're going to be like, is there any precedent for that? So Ohio State's the last one that I remember, and they won undefeated, didn't they? The first year with Urban Meyer. I don't exactly remember that, but do we really think that the college football playoffs going to be like, yeah, we're going to put a Michigan team in there that has been thrown a scarlet letter on them saying that they're suspended and that they're not eligible because of all this. So you got to be careful what you wish for. Is that worth it? I mean, you might really think that Michigan was going to win it for sure. A case against the NCAA. NCAA is a bunch of clowns. Everybody agrees with that. Michigan's got great lawyers. I agree with that. So let's fight them for another 2-3 years in court. Like eventually just, the NCAA will dissolve that angle. I mean, it is an angle. Too late. Well, there have been people all along, Trevor, going back to when Harbaugh had to sit out the first 3 games of the 2023 season. Harbaugh didn't want to sit out those first 3 games. And there are a lot of folks that feel like that was the beginning of the end for Harbaugh is when he wanted a new contract in 2020. Was that it? Following 2020 season. And they cut his salary in half. That was like putting a dunce cap on him. And he was like, I'm immediately out of here whenever I can get out of here. And, he tried, so I understand that. But if it wasn't enough, that when Ward stepped in and made him sit down for the first 3 games of the 2023 season, that really could have been the final straw. And for a lot of people, they think that. So if they didn't suspend Harbaugh, could you imagine if they didn't sit him down for those first 3 games? Of course, they did tried to fight the next suspension, Patini's suspension for those 3 games starting against Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State. They tried to fight that. They got the court injunction and everything else, and it didn't work. But this one would. I mean, that one didn't. And everybody was pretty sure because they drew a Michigan judge. Remember that? Oh, yeah, the Michigan judge. They'll get an injunction for sure. No injunction. Or whatever it was. Whatever those things are called. That it didn't happen. If Harbaugh would have stayed around and they didn't suspend him for the first three, and ended up fighting, and then he had to get suspended for the next three, what would he have been doing last year? And what were they going to? How much of the book were they going to throw at him? I mean, he had to leave, pretty much. Even if Ward would have doubled his salary in 2021, which was never going to happen there. But Sam says it just feels like the NCAA hates Michigan. Yeah, I understand that. It's like that with, I see people say that like Pat Forty. Pat Forty works for SI. They're like, oh, Pat Forty hates Michigan. No, Pat Forty likes controversy. And Pat Forty, if Clemson had something going on, he'd be needling them. It's great content for people that follow college football. Off-season stories about dealing with the NCAA. That's why Harbaugh, everybody liked, because he created a lot of content too. Yeah, it feels like the NCAA hates Michigan because they've been embroiled in a Burgergate, non-compliance, and then right back where you get your everything's crossed and everything else when it comes to the sign stealing. If I'm not standing up for the NCAA, but the NCAA's like over here, oh yeah, you guys look like you hate. No, we don't hate. We like Michigan. I think people that think that the NCAA hates Michigan. Probably like that. It's a little bit of a victim mentality. You get in trouble. They always say that. Well, I've always heard that. That you get in front of the judge, and judge says, you don't want to come back here. But once you get in that system, and then you end up, you got a warrant, or you get pulled over, you didn't have a tail light. Next thing you know, you're getting thrown in jail again. You're kind of sitting back there. You're like, man, judge hates me. Didn't pay your taxes for a couple. I don't know what it is. The government hates me. The NCAA hates me. The new life, capitulating over and over again, looks weak. The NCAA won't stop. Well, it's capitulating over and over. So they suspended Harbaugh with the idea that this is what the NCAA wants. They want capitulation. They want what I have seen over the years. They want you to self-impose. They do want you to look like you're getting down on one knee and saying, yes, we did this. We are admitting it. And these are our why we're doing it. And we're hoping that you will then lessen the blow. So it does look weak. Now, the part about the NCAA won't stop, I don't know. I don't know about that part. On June 6th, if the NCAA comes out and says, we're accepting the 2-game ban, or we're going to tack one more game on, and then we're going to hit them with the largest fine. Most people are predicting this. I say this is what I've seen for a gigantic fine, the biggest ever. Stallions, a 10-year show cause. Jim Harbaugh, the biggest show cause ever for a head coach. People will be like, wow, did he really deserve that? I don't know, he's gone. They can do it. What does it really mean? It's just one for the record books. He gets the longest show cause. Same thing with Stallions. And then Michigan, but it could be over then. So then at that point, they will have stopped, won't they? Sam has been in love with the wing helmet since the Anthony Carter days. You and me both, Sam. We've been through this, Rutgers and Ohio State. This angle, collusion. Yeah, like I said, I don't know about the specific rules. Coaches share tapes all the time and everything, but it is, I don't know if it was was Purdue and Ohio State, did they have a camera trained on the Michigan sideline, and that's what they were sharing with each other from the sideline video, or was it just taken from the TV cameras? I mean, so that's it. This is another one that people say it worked for Tennessee. They told the NCAA to pound sand, and they did. Yeah, not really. Well, that had to do with NIL, so this is different. This is different than, yeah, they did take him to court, and they did get a victory, but Tennessee still got hit with a bunch of different things that happened to him. And if you look at the long list of things that happened to him, I mean, show causes, penalties, a bunch of stuff left and right. It's not like they were completely exonerated and said, oh, Tennessee's great. Everything's going good now. And it was different. It was about, NIL and yeah, there were fines and everything, but it wasn't about this particular thing. So I don't know. People cite Tennessee and the way they went about it. And then they look at Tennessee's politics and who's backing. So, I think there's a point to it. I'm not completely dismissing, like, Tennessee is something that people bring up all the time. So that's it. Let's see if anybody else. Dre says the sign stealing was not that big of a deal. Yeah, here's the thing. Maybe not. If Michigan never hired Connor Stalions, or if Stalions never did do any sort of advanced scouting, or if Stalions never did get his computer hacked. Now let's say there was no Connor Stalions. The Michigan just had a mundane sign stealer that went about it like, talking with other coaches and everything else. Michigan. So you play this game on the Michigan side, and we even say this because midway through the season, they had a bunch of easy games. They won them all. And then all the tough games, Stalions was out. So that's always been the thing. Michigan didn't have Stalions. This is a fair and square, which, is a good point. They may not have needed any of that ever. And Michigan would have just done everything, and they would have had, maybe it had to do with the burger thing. That would have been it. Or you can make the case, if you're someone else, that it was everything. You don't know, and I don't know. So anybody that's saying that, and I've heard former players say, not just Michigan players, I mean, while this was going on, you had a half dozen people saying, oh, yeah, it's a big deal. No big deal. We don't know. You don't know it was that big of a deal. You really don't know that. So that's one of these things that I can't say. The idea was that it was supposed to help. That's why you do it. But I don't know how much it helped. Who knows if they were really doing it or not? Nobody knows that except a couple coaches. The players might not know. They might just know the signal's coming in. But you don't know that, Dre. Moore had to miss one game in 2023. Not sure what the issue is now. Well, the issue is that he's got a pattern. This is the second time. A repeat offender is what he is. And so the first one had to do with the Burgergate one, and this one now has to do when Stalions was found out. The first thing Moore did is grab his phone and deleted all of his texts. Now that totally looks suspicious, but you could say, well, he was scared. Okay, he was scared. And then Moore either handed him over, or the NCAA was like, look, we can just get those texts ourselves. I'm not 100% sure which one of those two, but Moore then was like, oh, well, we can hand him over now. And then they looked and they're like, well, there's really nothing incriminating in the actual text, but the act of looking suspicious, should that be a quote unquote crime? It shouldn't be that big of a deal, I would say, unless there was something on those texts. Like, yo, what's up with those signals? I don't know. What up? There could be coding and everything involved in those, so I don't know. Thank you, RM. New life. Yeah, I mean, arguing, I don't know about the how much it was going to happen and everything else. And talking about the rule is ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that part. That it feels like it was ridiculous and that Michigan was a small bylaw and that there's so many other things going on. What the hell? I do know that it just continually can play over and over and over again, and that you feel like you get attacked by, the and this is what it is. If Michigan, if this has nothing to do with Michigan, and let's say Clemson was doing everything, well, we would all just be casually like, Clemson's a bunch of crook, and so that's just what it is right now. Michigan has the spotlight on them, and they have to take all of this criticism, and that is no fun. And so where do we go right here? Well, we wait until, was it June 6th or 7th? And we find out if this is going to be enough. And people are weighing, no, it's not. Absolutely not. The rivals are saying it, and Michigan fans are like saying this is too much already. My opinion is that if it's a 2-game suspension and a fine and recruiting penalties that Michigan will be able to survive, then it is a win. And when it comes down to it, of what they went through to get there, Jim Harbaugh, the way he had to fight fire with fire, I don't know. I don't think that he had to have a crazy guy like Stalions, but he did. I mean, what can I do about it now? The one thing about Stalions is if he didn't get nabbed, he was just getting wilder and wilder by the game. He's wearing the Knight Rider glasses on the stateside line. He was expanding his network of shooting video. I mean, who knows what that guy was going to do next? So that was just going to keep happening. At some point, he was going to get caught, whether somebody hacked into his computer or not. I mean, he was, that's what happens with dudes like that. They just keep going. He wasn't stopping until the manifesto was complete and that Michigan ruled the world. I mean, he was a little crazed when it came down to that. That's why if I was hiring for Michigan in the background checks and everything else, I would not be hiring a super fan that would be put in position that could hurt Michigan football. Stallion should have been working, if he wasn't working for, counterintelligence or something for, the Navy, he should have been working in the alumni association to, get everybody to, come to the pregame, not recruiting manifestos and an opportunity that could get you into hot water, because that's what crazed fans will do. They'll sleep in your car and do things like Stallions did. Now, New Life, you made a lot of good points, and you've gone through them here, and we have, but this is the one where you have no leg to stand on. He absolutely made every attempt to hide what he was doing. He had everything. His computer got hacked. That's how we saw. He wasn't telling everybody, hey, I'm paying for these. I'm paying for people to go shoot video for me. No, he was hiding that. He absolutely was, not telling everybody he was doing that. That's what happened when his computer got hacked. Everybody found out. And that's when he was on that was one of the tells on the Netflix show. When he was out there and was like, yeah, this is no big deal. And everybody's looking at him like, it was a big deal. That's where he looked really guilty. That's where the NCAA was like, yeah, this is where they say don't say anything until when you get caught. When he was running his mouth for that hour, sitting across from the stadium in his car, the one part where he was like, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. These were just, these are just people that liked college football that were sitting right across and, taping it from him. okay. That's when that should have put, if you didn't have any alarm bells going off, that should have been like, yeah, Connor. That, and when they were asking him about his disguise at Central Michigan, he couldn't say anything about that. There was the other one. There were a few marks on the Netflix thing where Stallions looked really guilty, and those were two of them. And that was one of them that you brought up right there. But all those other things, I think that, they're pretty good points. If this is the first time you've ever watched this show, we don't always sit around talking about in circles and Michigan and everything that's going on with the NCAA and notice of allegations and committee on infractions, but it did just happen, and you come back and you just give your opinion on it, and you analyze. And I truly admit that Michigan fans have been backed into a corner here, and you've had to make a decision, and you pretty much, it's not a fun thing to do and say, well, maybe we did some things here, so we're just going to have to pay. That's not a fun thing to do. And so you can, blame somebody. And the NCAA is a good one to blame. Ward Manuel is a good one to blame. Jim Harbaugh, who, should be blamed a little bit in here, but he's a great coach. And I would do it all over again. And I thought it was worth it. And that's the person that I would blame here. But, after a while, you got to, blame. It's tough to do, and nobody wants to do that. Okay, accept responsibility, and let's work in this system that can take years, and let's get down on a knee and let's slap ourselves, hoping that it's going to be enough. I mean, that's a tough thing to do. And meanwhile, the opposing fans are just more. I mean, it's hard. That's why I suggest if somebody that is chapter and versing every single thing about this, and it's driving you crazy, just step away from it. Step away from your computer and just wait from June 6th. That's it. Okay. We'll be back on Friday. We'll see you over on the Maize and Blue Review. Thanks so much for joining us. We always enjoy your feedback. If you want to put something on the podcast, if you go back, I get the feedback. If you put a message underneath I get these, of course, but then afterwards, if you want to put anything there, and I'm always looking on the podcast as well for comments and all of that. So thanks so much. Well, a new life. Good to see you. Thanks for all your comments. You had a lot of good ones. Top contributor of the day. You got that going for you. I'm going to mow my lawn. And it's 72 degrees. And I got a lawnmower that's going to start. Life's pretty good, man. Not that bad. Take care, everybody.